when Muhammad Yunus, the Bangladeshi economist who many consider the father of microfinance, when he talks about how he started these pioneering efforts and kind of looks back on how it all began, he'll often say that he looked at how traditional banks operated, and he realized what he would do is just do the exact opposite, right? So he said, banks would only make large loans, he would make small loans. Banks would only lend to men, he would lend to women. Banks would require you to have collateral, right, to get a loan. He would give loans to people who had no collateral to offer. Banks would require you to be literate, right, to fill out very complicated forms. He would give loans to people who were literate, make the process accessible to someone who had no education. And banks have an office in the city, and they open the doors and tell you to come to them, right? Microfinance goes out to where the people are, goes out into the communities. We currently are supporting 27 of those MFIs in 7 different countries in Latin America. And we have an office here in Seattle, staff based in Seattle, and we also have an office in Managua, Nicaragua. There's about 560 million people in Latin America, and 1 out of 3 of those people live below their country's national poverty line. 1 out of 6 lives on less than $2 a day. And it's estimated there's about 48 million people throughout Latin America that could benefit from microcredit. Now, these institutions that we partner with are what we call social enterprises. They share Global Partnerships' commitment to really maximizing the social impact of microfinance in the lives of the people they're serving. So they're, along those lines, committed to especially reaching really underserved populations, which means women, the rural poor, and people living on less than $2 a day. They share that commitment. And many of our partners are integrating other complementary social services with microfinance services. And at this particular meeting, there's a half-hour training on menopause. And these health promoters are talking to the women in the group about menopause, and the women in the group, women of all different ages, are talking to each other and sharing their experience, talking really freely and openly, about how to deal with the challenges of that transition, what it's like, what are the symptoms, what does this mean to go through it. And what was really amazing and truly moving was that the women in our group that were visiting, right, from the States, joined in the conversation. And pretty soon the differences between us dissolved. It wasn't like women from Nicaragua and women from the US, it was just women talking and supporting each other and talking freely and openly with each other. And it was really quite moving, just one of those moments of like, oh, wow, we're not so different. There's a lot in common. Nelly Guzman in El Salvador is an example of a borrower who's really built her business over time. She started with a $35 loan. I mean, $35 is a couple of CDs, right? It's like, that $35 enabled her to kick off this business where she buys pigs. She buys already fattened pigs, and then she butchers them and prepares the pork and sells the pork. And that was 5 years ago. And her most recent loan was for $500. So she's grown her business where she's able to buy more pigs, fatter pigs, more often, and then gradually, increase the income level of her family. Marta, here in El Salvador, used her loan to buy sewing equipment, and she makes dresses and sells them in her community. Guillermo in Guatemala used his loan to pay for that loom and to pay for the materials with which he weaves these beautiful traditional Mayan textiles. One of the most unique businesses I've ever seen is this woman in Peru who used her loan to buy a pool table, and she rents out the use of her pool table to people in her village, and it's the only pool table in town. And microfinance provides them that opportunity, and they make good use of it when they're given that opportunity. In fact, the repayment rates among our borrowers are 98% and higher, and they're paying back their loans at rates of 98% and higher. So they set a good example for us here, actually. Midweek, we typically take a kind of a change of pace to do some sightseeing. We found that it's good to kind of change the rhythm up, and it'd also be a real shame to be in these amazing countries and not take in some of the cultural richness and the real beauty of the place. So just by way of example, on our last trip to Bolivia, we did a bit of traveling, and we really got a sense of what a culturally rich place it is. And I just want to let you know just a bit about Bolivia, because that's where we're heading on our very next trip, is that it's a majority indigenous country. The majority of the people there speak either Quechua or Aymara, 2 indigenous languages, and some of them also speak Spanish, but some only speak the indigenous language. And that indigenous culture is prevalent just almost throughout the entire country. So who travels on these journeys? Well, most of the folks are from Seattle, although on pretty much every trip the past couple of years we've had at least 1 or 2 people from some other part of the country. And they all share an interest in getting to understand microfinance better and in partnering with us in our work. In fact, part of the application form for our partnerships asks you to reflect upon why you're interested in traveling with us, why you'd like to participate. Because there's other ways to travel in Latin America than besides traveling with Global Partnerships, right? Our trips are really focused on seeing the real impact of microfinance and getting to know the work of Global Partnerships and really seeking how you might get more involved in our work. So if you're someone that enjoys really getting off of the beaten path and really wants to understand microfinance better and wants to get involved in helping people help themselves out of poverty, I really encourage you to consider applying for one of our trips.